This audiobook is not here to motivate you. It is here to make you unmovable. Right now, your emotions are being pulled by people, situations, opinions, and noise you did not choose. You react, you explain, you defend, you hesitate. An unshakable person does none of that. They do not argue for respect. They do not rush to respond. They do not bend under pressure. They decide once, and the world adjusts. Over the next few hours, you will learn how to build a mind that does not flinch, does not beg, and does not break. This is the discipline of inner solidity. This is how you become unshakable.
Most people think reaction is natural. It is not. Reaction is not instinct. Reaction is training. Bad training. It is behavior you rehearsed for years without realizing it. Someone pushes, you respond. Someone questions you, you explain. Someone disrespects you, you react emotionally, again and again and again. That is not strength. That is conditioning. And every time you react without choice, power leaks. You have a choice. That's the key. An unshakable person is not someone who feels nothing. They feel everything, but they do not obey every feeling. They pause, they assess, they decide, they act on their terms. Most people never pause. They jump straight from trigger to response. That jump is where power dies. Delay is dominance. Read that again. Delay is dominance. Powerful people pause by default. Weak people react by default. It's not about emotion, it's about discipline. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to think. You don't need their permission to stay silent. Yet most people behave as if they do. Someone sends a message, you rush to reply. Someone challenges you, you rush to defend. Someone disapproves, you rush to explain. Why? Because reaction feels urgent, and urgency feels important. But urgency is usually fear wearing a mask. You have a choice. That's the key. Let's be clear. Reacting quickly does not make you sharp. It makes you predictable, and predictable people are easy to control. If someone can press a button and get an immediate emotional response from you, they own that button. And if they own that button, they own part of you. An unshakable person owns their own buttons. Delay is dominance. Think about real power dynamics, in negotiations, in leadership, in conflict. The person who speaks less controls more. The person who moves slower sees more. The person who pauses forces the other side to reveal themselves. Silence is not weakness. Silence is pressure. Here's a real-world example. Two people are in a tense conversation. One accuses, the other stays silent. No justification, no argument, no emotional reaction. Just calm eye contact, calm breathing, stillness. What happens? The accuser starts talking more. They fill the silence. They explain themselves. They overplay their hand. Control shifts instantly. Why? Because silence creates gravity. Reaction hands control away. Pause pulls control back. That's the key. You have a choice. Most people are terrified of silence. They think if they don't respond immediately, they lose status. In reality, the opposite is true. When you pause, you signal strength. When you react, you signal vulnerability. It's not about confidence, it's about control. And control is trained. Here's the hard truth. If you can't help reacting, that means you are not in charge. Your nervous system is. An untrained nervous system reacts first and thinks later. An unshakable person trains the pause until it becomes automatic. This is not philosophy, this is practice. The first discipline you must build is the gap between stimulus and response. That gap is where your future self lives. You have a choice. That's the key. When something triggers you, do not ask, "What should I say?" Ask, "Do I need to say anything at all?" Most of the time, the answer is no. You don't need to win every moment. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to prove every point. It's not about being right. It's about being solid. Delay is dominance. Here's a simple behavioral instruction. Simple, but not easy. When triggered, count to 5 internally before doing anything. 5 slow breaths. No words, no typing, no facial reaction if possible. 5 breaths. That pause alone will eliminate half of your unnecessary reactions. You have a choice. That's the key. Notice how many of your reactions are not strategic. They are emotional reflexes designed to relieve discomfort, not to create outcomes. You react to feel better in the moment, but you pay for it later with lost respect, lost leverage, and lost peace. Unshakable people are willing to feel discomfort temporarily to gain control permanently. It's not about comfort, it's about command. Another truth most people avoid. Fast reactions feel powerful because they feel expressive, but expression is not power. Containment is. A lion does not roar every minute. It watches, it waits, it moves when it counts. Delay is dominance. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need their permission to think. You don't need their permission to stay composed. If someone pressures you for an immediate answer, that is a sign to pause even longer. Pressure reveals intention, and pressure is often a test. When you pass that test by not reacting, you change how people treat you. They stop pushing, they stop rushing you, they start adjusting because they feel your stability. You have a choice. That's the key. Let's anchor this. Reaction is not instinct. Reaction is habit, and habits can be broken. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Every time you delay instead of rushing, you train dominance. Every time you choose silence instead of emotional noise, you become harder to move. This is how unshakable people are built. Not through motivation, through restraint. You don't rise by doing more, you rise by leaking less. And the first leak to seal is reaction. Master this, and everything else becomes easier. Because once you control your reactions, you control your direction. You mastered the pause. You stopped leaking power. Now it's time to understand what truly keeps you grounded under pressure.
Most people misunderstand emotional control. They think control means pretending. They think control means stuffing emotions down. They think control means acting calm while boiling inside. That is not control. That is suppression, and suppression always explodes. Suppression creates pressure. Control creates clarity. That's the key. An unshakable person does not kill emotion. They contain it. They feel the emotion fully without obeying it. Feel it. Don't follow it. You have a choice. Most people believe emotions command behavior. They don't. They suggest behavior, and suggestions can be accepted or rejected. Weak discipline accepts every suggestion. Strong discipline evaluates. It's not about being emotionless. It's about being unruled. You don't need their permission to feel. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to stay in control. Yet people act as if emotion gives orders. Anger says attack. Fear says escape. Insecurity says explain. And most people obey instantly. That's where power leaks. You have a choice. That's the key. Emotional suppression looks calm on the outside, but chaotic inside. Emotional control looks calm on the outside and stable inside. One is fragile, the other is solid. Suppression says, I shouldn't feel this. Control says, I feel this, and I'm still in charge. Feel it, don't follow it. Let's talk about leaders under pressure. Real leaders don't panic first, they stabilize first. When systems fail, markets crash, teams freeze, leaders slow down. They regulate themselves before they regulate others. Why? Because chaos spreads faster than clarity. A panicked leader multiplies panic. A calm leader compresses it. That's not talent, that's training. It's not about confidence, it's about discipline. You have a choice. That's the key. Emotional control starts in the body, not the mind. This is where most people fail. They try to think their way out of emotion. That never works. Emotion lives in the nervous system. Control starts with regulation. Here is a real behavioral instruction. When emotion rises, do not speak first. Do not decide first. Regulate first. Slow your breathing, drop your shoulders, relax your jaw. These are not small things. These are commands to your nervous system. You are telling your body, stand down. You don't need their permission to regulate yourself. Most people are slaves to unregulated emotion. That's why they overreact, overshare, overexplain, and overcommit. It's not about passion, it's about control. Suppression ignores emotion. Control processes it. Here's the difference. Suppression says, ignore it and move on. Control says, acknowledge it and choose. You have a choice. That's the key. When you feel anger, you don't need to release it immediately. You need to contain it until it becomes useful. Anger can sharpen boundaries. Fear can sharpen awareness. Sadness can sharpen perspective, but only if you don't let them drive. Feel it, don't follow it. Unshakable people don't deny emotion. They delay reaction until emotion settles into information. Emotion is data. Reaction is waste. It's not about emotional intelligence buzzwords. It's about emotional authority. Authority over yourself. Let's ground this with a real example. In a crisis meeting, everyone is talking fast. Voices are loud. Decisions are rushed. Someone stands out, not because they dominate, but because they slow everything down. They speak last, they speak calmly, they choose words carefully, and the room adjusts. Why? Because regulated energy overrides chaotic energy. That's not charisma, that's control. You have a choice. That's the key. Here is a discipline to build emotional control daily. Once per day, deliberately sit with discomfort without acting. No phone, no distraction, no escape. Just sit. Let the emotion rise. Let it peak. Let it pass. This trains your nervous system that emotion is survivable. Most reactions exist because people believe emotion must be discharged immediately. That belief is false. Emotion passes whether you react or not. Reaction just makes it messy. It's not about avoiding feeling bad. It's about not being owned by feeling bad. You don't need their permission to stay composed. You don't need their permission to say, I'll respond later. You don't need their permission to not react at all. That's power. Suppression collapses under pressure. Control sharpens under pressure. That's the difference. Unshakable people are not calmer because life is easier. They are calmer because they trained when life was hard. They learned to feel without obeying. Feel it, don't follow it. You have a choice. That's the key. Notice this. The moment you stop reacting emotionally, people start behaving differently around you. They measure their words. They slow down. They sense restraint. Because restraint is rare, and rarity creates respect. This chapter is not asking you to be cold. It is asking you to be sovereign. Sovereign over your inner state. Because once you control your emotions, external chaos loses leverage. You stop leaking power internally. You stop leaking power externally. And that is how you become unshakable. You learned to feel without obeying. You learned that control creates clarity. You learned that suppression is weakness, not strength. Now it's time to look at where control breaks down most often, at the line you fail to defend.
The world is not cruel. It is efficient. It looks for softness. It looks for gaps. It looks for what it can get away with. People push where resistance is soft. That's not personal. That's human nature. And if your boundaries are unclear, inconsistent, or emotional, they will be tested again and again and again. What you allow once,
you teach forever. That's the key. Most people don't have boundary problems, they have enforcement problems. They say yes when they mean no. They laugh off disrespect to avoid tension. They stay silent when something crosses a line. And then they wonder why it keeps happening. You have a choice. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about controlling access. Access to your time, access to your energy, access to your attention, access to your emotional world. You don't need their permission to draw a line. You don't need their permission to hold it. Yet most people behave as if they do. They negotiate their own limits. They explain their boundaries. They apologize for enforcing them. That's not strength. That's fear dressed as politeness. It's not about being rude. It's about being clear. What you allow once, you teach forever. Let's be direct. Every small concession teaches people how to treat you. Every ignored disrespect sets a precedent. Every tolerated interruption becomes normal. Every unchallenged overstep becomes expected. This is how lifelong disrespect begins, not with one big violation, with many small ones. You have a choice. That's the key. Strong boundaries are boring. They are calm. They are consistent. Weak boundaries are emotional. They fluctuate. They depend on mood. Unshakable people don't debate boundaries. They demonstrate them. They don't threaten. They don't over-explain. They act. It's not about aggression. It's about discipline. Here's a real-world example. Someone constantly interrupts you. You smile. You let it slide. You don't want to seem difficult. What happens? They keep interrupting. Why? Because you trained them to. What you allow once, you teach forever. The unshakable response is simple. You stop speaking. You wait. You resume only when they stop. No anger, no lecture, just consequence. That's boundary enforcement. You have a choice. That's the key. Boundaries are not words, they are patterns. People don't listen to what you say, they watch what you tolerate, and the world always tests consistency. One strong response can reset years of poor treatment. One weak response can erase years of strength. This is why discipline matters. It's not about anger, it's about follow-through. Here is a behavioral instruction. Identify one boundary you've been avoiding enforcing. Just one. Then decide the consequence in advance, not emotionally, strategically. If it happens again, what changes? Less access? Delayed response? No response? Decide before the moment arrives. Because boundaries enforced in advance are calm, boundaries enforced emotionally are messy. You have a choice. That's the key. Another hard truth. People who respect themselves attract respect. People who negotiate their worth invite negotiation. Stop negotiating. You don't need to explain your standards. You need to live them. If someone consistently crosses your boundaries, that is information. And information requires action. Not discussion, not justification, action. What you allow once, you teach forever. Unshakable people understand this early. That's why their lives look quieter. Fewer conflicts, fewer explanations, fewer disrespectful encounters. Not because they're lucky, because they're disciplined. They don't teach people that access is unlimited. They don't teach people that disrespect is tolerated. They don't teach people that pressure works. They teach firmness. You have a choice. That's the key. Boundaries are not words, they are patterns. Bonus: boundaries are the walls that protect emotional control. Without boundaries, emotional discipline collapses. If anyone can interrupt you, pressure you, or intrude at will, you will constantly be reacting. And reaction is where power leaks. This chapter is about containment, of space, of time, of self. You learned that control creates clarity.
Now you learn that boundaries protect control. You stop teaching people how to disrespect you. You stop rewarding bad behavior with access. You stop negotiating your standards. This is how you become harder to move. You don't raise your voice, you raise your standards. And once boundaries are solid, something else becomes obvious. You don't need to explain yourself nearly as much as you think.
Most people talk too much. They explain, they justify, they defend. Not because it's necessary, but because they are uncomfortable with silence and uncertainty. Explanation is often disguised insecurity. That's the truth most people don't want to hear. Unshakable people understand something simple. Clarity does not argue. That's the key. If you are clear about who you are, what you want, and what you stand for, you do not need to convince undecided people. You let outcomes speak. You have a choice. Every time you explain yourself unnecessarily, you give away leverage. You shift from grounded authority to seeking approval. And approval seeking weakens your position instantly. You don't need their permission to decide. You don't need their permission to act. You don't need their permission to move forward. Yet many people behave as if they do. They over-explain decisions. They narrate their thinking. They justify boundaries. Why? Because they want reassurance. It's not about communication, it's about validation. And validation is a trap. It's not about clarity, it's about insecurity. That's the difference. Clarity does not argue. Undecided people are dangerous to your momentum, not because they disagree, but because they delay. They ask questions not to understand, but to postpone. They listen not to decide, but to stay comfortable. They keep you talking while they stay neutral. And the longer you explain, the more authority you lose. You have a choice. That's the key. Unshakable people speak once, clearly, and then they stop. They don't debate their direction. They don't negotiate their standards. They don't perform logic for people who are not committed. They move, and movement creates credibility. Outcomes speak louder than arguments ever could. Let's be direct. If someone truly needs information, they ask focused questions and act on answers. If someone keeps you explaining in circles, they are undecided by choice. And undecided people drain energy. You don't need their permission to stop engaging. You don't need their permission to disengage politely. You don't need their permission to let silence finish the conversation. Silence is often the most honest response. Clarity does not argue. Here's a real-world example. You make a decision. Someone questions it. You explain. They hesitate. You explain more. They hesitate again. You add details. You justify intentions. Now you're on trial. Not because you were wrong, but because you kept talking. Unshakable people handle this differently. They state the decision once, they listen once, they respond briefly, or not at all. Then they act. Why? Because action ends debate. That's not arrogance, that's authority. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's a behavioral instruction you must adopt. Before you explain anything, ask yourself one question. Is this explanation necessary for execution, or am I seeking approval? If it's about execution, keep it short. If it's about approval, stop. You don't owe clarity to people who are not responsible for the outcome. That's the discipline. It's not about being secretive, it's about being selective. Most people confuse transparency with weakness. They think openness builds trust. It doesn't. Consistency does. Consistency builds trust. Results build trust. Boundaries build trust. Explanations build dependency. Clarity does not argue. Another hard truth, the more you explain, the more people feel entitled to an opinion. And opinions multiply when boundaries are weak. Unshakable people don't invite unnecessary opinions. They execute and let results reframe the conversation. You don't need their permission to move ahead quietly. You don't need their permission to succeed silently. You don't need their permission to let success do the talking. You have a choice. That's the key. Watch powerful figures closely. They don't overtalk. They don't over-justify. They don't chase agreement. They state, they pause, they proceed. Their certainty comes from alignment, not applause.
It's not about confidence, it's about discipline. Here's another practical rule. Never explain yourself twice. Once is clarity, twice is insecurity. If someone doesn't accept the first explanation, they are not confused, they are resistant. And resistance is not solved with words. It's solved with consequences or distance. Silence, reduced engagement, movement without announcement. These are responses of strength. Clarity does not argue. You have a choice. That's the key. Unnecessary explanation also reveals fear of misunderstanding. But misunderstanding is unavoidable and irrelevant. You cannot control how others interpret you. You can only control how clearly you act. Trying to manage perception is exhausting. Living your standards is efficient. Unshakable people choose efficiency. They let people misunderstand if necessary. They let silence feel uncomfortable. They let time reveal truth, because time always does. This chapter is not telling you to be cold. It is telling you to be contained. Contained speech, contained energy, contained intention. When you stop explaining, something powerful happens. People start listening more carefully. They ask better questions. They sense your self-trust. And those who don't, they drift away. That's not loss. That's filtration. You have a choice. That's the key. You don't need to convince undecided people. You don't need to drag anyone with you. You don't need to argue clarity into existence. You act. You hold your line. You let outcomes speak. This is how authority is built quietly. You've learned to stop reacting. You've learned to control emotion. You've learned to enforce boundaries. Now you've learned to stop explaining. Each step removes noise. Each step seals power leaks. And when explanation stops, something else takes its place. A calm that unsettles others. A stillness that commands attention. That calm becomes a weapon.
Most people think calm is passive. It is not. Calm is pressure without noise. Calm is strength without display. Calm is control made visible. Calm unnerves emotional opponents. That's the key. When others raise their voice, rush decisions, or push for reaction, calm becomes a weapon, not a defensive one, an offensive one. Still water runs deep. Say it again. Still water runs deep. Unshakable people don't try to overpower emotion. They let emotion exhaust itself against their calm. You have a choice. Most people believe intensity equals power. They think volume wins. They think urgency convinces. It doesn't. Intensity reveals instability. Urgency reveals fear. Calm reveals command. It's not about force, it's about discipline. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need their permission to think clearly under pressure. Yet many people abandon calm the moment tension appears. That's where they lose. Calm unnerves emotional opponents because it denies them what they want, a reaction. Reaction feeds conflict. Calm starves it. Still water runs deep. Look at negotiations. The loudest person rarely wins. The calmest person often does. Why? Because calm people gather information while others leak it. They listen while others talk. They observe while others perform. They wait while others rush. And when they speak once. That's not chance, that's strategy. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's a real-world example. Two negotiators sit across from each other. One pushes deadlines, raises stakes, uses pressure language. The other slows down, takes notes, asks fewer questions. The pressured one starts making concessions to fill the silence. The calm one says nothing and wins. Because restraint creates imbalance. Still water runs deep. Calm also creates unpredictability. Emotional people are easy to read. Calm people are not. If someone can't read you, they can't manipulate you. And manipulation always targets emotion first.
You don't need their permission to be unreadable. You don't need their permission to stay composed. That's power. Most people confuse calm with indifference. They think being calm means not caring. Wrong. Calm means you care enough to control yourself. It's not about apathy. It's about authority. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's how to weaponize calm in real life. First, slow your movements. Fast movement signals urgency. Urgency signals weakness. Slow movement signals confidence. Second, lower your voice under pressure. Emotion rises, your voice drops. This forces others to listen. Third, shorten your responses. Long explanations leak control. Short statements hold it. These are not personality traits. These are disciplines. Still water runs deep. Another truth. Calm exposes insecurity in others. When someone tries to provoke you and fails, they feel powerless. So they escalate, and escalation reveals everything. This is where most people break. They respond emotionally to escalation. Unshakable people do the opposite. They remain calm longer, because calm outlasts chaos. You have a choice. That's the key. Calm is also a filter. It repels unstable people and attracts serious ones. People who thrive on drama leave. People who respect discipline stay. That's not accidental. When you lead with calm, you set the emotional temperature of every room you enter. Leadership is emotional regulation first, strategy second. It's not about intelligence, it's about steadiness. Let's address a mistake. Many people try to look calm while internally panicking. That's suppression, and suppression fails. Real calm comes from preparation and regulation. You breathe slower, you ground your body, you accept discomfort. Calm is trained. Here's a daily practice. Once per day, intentionally slow down in a stressful moment. Walk slower, speak slower, think slower. This trains your nervous system that pressure does not require speed. You have a choice. That's the key. Another example. In conflict, one person attacks emotionally, the other stays calm and factual. No insults, no defensiveness, just grounded presence. Who controls the frame? Always the calm one, because emotional energy moves towards stillness. Still water runs deep. Calm is not just a shield, it's a mirror. It reflects instability back to the sender, and people don't like what they see. This is why calm is threatening. You don't need their permission to remain calm when provoked. You don't need their permission to refuse emotional games. It's not about winning arguments, it's about controlling dynamics. Most arguments end the moment one person refuses to escalate. That person wins by default. You have a choice. That's the key. Calm also preserves energy. Emotional reactions drain you. Calm compounds you. Unshakable people protect their energy fiercely. They know that long-term dominance is not built through bursts but through consistency. Still water runs deep. By now, you see the pattern. You stopped reacting. You controlled emotion. You enforced boundaries. You stopped explaining. Now you weaponize calm. Each step removes noise. Each step increases gravity. This is how you become a stabilizing force, someone others adjust around. Calm is not soft. Calm is unmovable. And once calm becomes your default, something powerful happens. You stop rushing. You stop being pulled. You stop letting urgency decide for you. Which brings us to the next discipline. Because the fastest way to lose calm is to live in a constant rush.
Most people think urgency means importance. It doesn't. Urgency usually means fear. Fear of missing out. Fear of losing approval. Fear of falling behind. Fear of discomfort.
Rushing is emotional submission. That's the key. When you rush, you hand control to external pressure. Deadlines, people, noise, none of them should own your tempo. Unshakable people decide the pace. They move slow and arrive strong. Say it again. Slow decisions, fast execution. You have a choice. Urgency feels productive, but it's often a cover for anxiety. It creates motion without direction, noise without progress. Speed without clarity is chaos. It's not about speed, it's about discipline. You don't need their permission to slow down. You don't need their permission to think. You don't need their permission to choose your timing. Yet many people behave as if they do. Someone pressures you for an answer, you rush. Someone sets an artificial deadline, you panic. Someone pushes urgency, you comply. That's not efficiency, that's submission. Rushing is emotional submission. That's the truth. Unshakable people are immune to false urgency. They recognize it immediately. They ask one question: is this truly urgent, or is someone trying to rush me? Most urgency is manufactured. You have a choice. That's the key. Look at high performers. They don't make big decisions in a hurry. They don't react to pressure instantly. They slow down when stakes are high. Why? Because consequences last longer than discomfort. Slow decisions, fast execution. This is the discipline. Slow decision-making allows clarity. Fast execution applies conviction. Reversing this order destroys outcomes. Most people decide fast and execute slow. They rush choices and hesitate on action. Unshakable people flip that. They deliberate calmly. Then they move without hesitation. That's power. You don't need their permission to say, "I'll decide tomorrow." You don't need their permission to step back. You don't need their permission to refuse rushed decisions. That refusal alone raises your status. Urgency is often a test. Those who fail the test rush. Those who pass slow down. You have a choice. That's the key. Let's talk about behavior. When someone pushes urgency, your first response should be internal stillness. Breathe. Pause. Create space. Then ask for time. Time reveals truth. If the offer disappears when you ask for time, it was never solid. If the pressure increases, it was manipulation. Either way, slowing down protects you. It's not about being difficult, it's about being deliberate. Slow decisions, fast execution. Here's a real-world example. In business, bad deals rely on urgency. Limited time, last chance, decide now. Strong players don't respond emotionally. They slow the conversation. They review. They wait. They let the other side talk. And often, the pressure collapses because urgency cannot survive calm. Still water runs deep. Rushing also damages credibility. People who rush appear reactive, not authoritative. When you slow down, people adjust. They wait. They listen. They respect your tempo. You set the pace. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's a daily discipline. Before making any significant decision, impose a delay, even a small one. 5 minutes, 1 hour, 1 night. That delay filters emotion out of the decision. Emotion wants speed. Wisdom wants space. It's not about perfection. It's about control. Another instruction. When urgency enters your body, tight chest, fast breath, do nothing. That sensation is a signal, not a command. Feel it. Don't follow it. You learned this earlier. Rushing is emotional submission. Unshakable people don't submit to emotion. They command it. You don't need their permission to stay calm under pressure. You don't need their permission to say no to urgency. You don't need their permission to move at your pace. That's authority. Slow decisions, fast execution. Execution is where speed matters. Once you decide, you move decisively.
No second guessing, no hesitation, no delay. This is where most people fail again. They rush the decision, then crawl in execution. They doubt, they overthink, they stall. Unshakable people commit. They decide once, slowly, and execute hard. That's discipline. You have a choice. That's the key. Urgency also kills calm. It pulls you out of presence and into panic. If you want to stay unshakable, you must eliminate unnecessary urgency. Not everything is now. Not everyone needs an answer. Not every opportunity is real. Stillness beats speed. By now, you see the pattern. Reaction loses power. Emotion demands obedience. Weak boundaries invite pressure. Over-explaining leaks authority. Calm disarms chaos. Urgency exposes fear. Each discipline removes another lever others use to move you. You become slower but stronger, quieter but heavier. You move slow and arrive strong. And once urgency no longer controls you, something else becomes obvious. You don't need to be liked to be respected, because real respect comes from inner independence.
Most people don't lack confidence. They lack independence. Specifically, emotional independence from approval. Approval seeking dissolves authority. That's the key. The moment you need to be liked, you hand power away. You soften your words, you bend your standards, you hesitate when firmness is required, and people feel it immediately. You have a choice. You can be liked or you can be respected, rarely both at the beginning. Respect outlives popularity. Say it again. Respect outlives popularity. Unshakable people understand this early. They don't chase smiles. They don't chase applause. They don't chase agreement. They chase alignment. It's not about ego. It's about discipline. You don't need their permission to be firm. You don't need their permission to disappoint them. You don't need their permission to hold your ground. Yet most people behave as if they do. They say yes when they mean no. They dilute truth to stay comfortable. They avoid conflict to stay liked. That comfort is expensive. Approval seeking is a hidden tax you pay daily. It costs you clarity. It costs you respect. It costs you self-trust. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's the truth most people avoid. If everyone likes you, you're not leading, you're accommodating. Leadership requires friction. Standards create resistance. Boundaries disappoint people who benefited from your weakness. That's not cruelty, that's correction. Respect outlives popularity. Let's talk behavior. When you stop chasing approval, 3 things happen. First, your words get shorter. Second, your decisions get cleaner. Third, your presence gets heavier. People feel your certainty, not because you demand respect, but because you no longer beg for acceptance. It's not about confidence, it's about independence. Here's a discipline you must practice. Before agreeing to anything, ask yourself, am I doing this because it's right or because I want to be liked? If it's the second, pause. That pause will save you years. You have a choice. That's the key. Approval seeking also creates resentment. Every time you betray yourself to please someone, resentment builds silently. And resentment leaks out eventually through tone, sarcasm, withdrawal, or burnout. Unshakable people choose clean discomfort now over toxic resentment later. They disappoint quickly and honestly. They don't overpromise. They don't perform. They stand. You don't need their permission to choose self-respect. You don't need their permission to say no. You don't need their permission to be steady instead of sweet. Stillness commands more respect than charm. Respect outlives popularity. Another example. A leader enforces a standard. People complain. Tension rises. For a moment, they are disliked. But the system improves. Results follow.
Order returns. What happens next? The same people who complained begin to trust the leader. Why? Because consistency creates safety. Not likability, consistency. Unshakable people play the long game. They don't manage moods, they manage direction. You have a choice. That's the key. Approval seeking also weakens boundaries. If you need to be liked, you won't enforce consequences. And without consequences, standards collapse. This is why detachment matters. Detachment does not mean coldness. It means clarity without attachment to reaction. You state the boundary, you enforce it, you don't argue. Clarity does not argue, and it does not plead. Respect outlives popularity. Here's another discipline. Let people feel disappointed. Don't rush to fix it. Don't over-explain. Don't apologize for having standards. Disappointment is information. It shows you where expectations were misaligned. Alignment is more important than approval. You have a choice. That's the key. Approval seeking also creates self-trust, and self-trust is visible. People sense when you don't need them to agree. They sense when your decisions are internal. They sense when you're not fishing for reaction. That energy changes dynamics instantly. You stop being managed by others' moods. You stop adjusting to keep peace. You stop shrinking to stay included. You become solid. And solidity attracts the right people. Not everyone, the right ones. Respect outlives popularity. By now, the pattern is undeniable. You stopped reacting. You controlled emotion. You enforced boundaries. You stopped explaining. You weaponized calm. You rejected urgency. Now you detach from approval. Each step removes another external hook, another way the world pulls you. You are becoming harder to move. And once you no longer need approval, something powerful becomes possible. You can finally use silence, not as avoidance, but as force. Because silence requires confidence, and confidence without approval is real power.
Most people are afraid of silence. They rush to fill it. They talk to relieve tension. They explain to stay comfortable. That fear costs them power. Silence is not weakness. It's compression. Silence stores power. Noise leaks it. That's the key. Every unnecessary word releases energy. Every unnecessary explanation dilutes authority. Every unnecessary reaction weakens presence. Unshakable people speak less. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand leverage. Silence creates gravity. Say it again. Silence creates gravity. You have a choice. You can speak to relieve discomfort, or you can stay silent to maintain control. Most people choose comfort. Unshakable people choose control. It's not about being mysterious. It's about being deliberate. You don't need their permission to be quiet. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to let silence work. Yet many people behave as if silence is rude or risky. It isn't. Noise is risky. Silence stores power. Noise leaks it. When you speak less, others speak more, and when others speak more, they reveal themselves. This is why silence is strategic. Strategic silence forces others to fill the space. They explain, they justify, they overplay their hand. You simply listen. That's control. You have a choice. That's the key. Watch any high-stakes interaction, negotiations, interrogations, leadership meetings. The person who holds silence longest controls the frame. They don't interrupt. They don't rescue others from discomfort. They let tension do the work. Stillness is pressure. Silence creates gravity. Here's a real-world example. You ask a question. The other person answers but stops short. The silence stretches. Most people rush to clarify or soften.
Unshakable people stay quiet. And suddenly, the other person keeps talking. They add details, they expose motives, they reveal uncertainty. All because you didn't speak. Silence stores power. Noise leaks it. You don't need their permission to wait. You don't need their permission to listen fully. Listening is not passive, it's dominant. Another truth. Talking feels like control, but listening is control. When you talk, you reveal your position. When you listen, you gather theirs. That's leverage. You have a choice. That's the key. Silence also protects you from mistakes. Most errors happen when people talk emotionally. They say too much. They say it too fast. They say it to feel better. Unshakable people let emotion pass before they speak. Feel it. Don't follow it. Silence gives emotion time to settle into clarity. It's not about suppression. It's about discipline. Here's a behavioral instruction. Before responding to anything important, pause for 3 seconds, minimum. 3 seconds of silence. This does 2 things. It signals thoughtfulness. It prevents impulsive speech. 3 seconds can save years. You have a choice. That's the key. Silence also magnifies your words. When you speak less, what you say carries more weight. People lean in, they listen harder, they remember. Words spoken rarely land heavier. Words spoken constantly evaporate. Silence creates gravity. Another example. In conflict, one person argues, the other listens silently. No interruption, no defense. The arguing person runs out of steam because emotional energy needs resistance to survive. Silence denies resistance. Silence stores power. Noise leaks it. You don't need their permission to disengage verbally. You don't need their permission to stop explaining. You don't need their permission to let silence conclude the interaction. That's strength. Many people fear silence because they think it signals weakness. In reality, weakness is the inability to tolerate discomfort. Silence requires strength. It requires self-trust. It requires emotional regulation. It requires patience. Unshakable people train all 3. You have a choice. That's the key. Silence is also a filter. It filters serious people from noisy ones. Those who respect you will adjust to your silence. Those who rely on control through pressure will escalate. And escalation reveals intent. Silence reveals truth. This chapter is not telling you to never speak. It's telling you to speak with intention. Speak when it matters. Stay silent when it doesn't. That ratio determines your authority. It's not about communication. It's about compression. Pressure increases in compressed spaces. Silence compresses. Silence creates gravity. By now, the pattern is clear. Reaction leaks power. Emotion demands obedience. Weak boundaries invite intrusion. Explanation invites debate. Calm disarms chaos. Urgency exposes fear. Approval-seeking dissolves authority. Silence seals it all. Silence is the container that holds everything you've built. But silence alone is not enough. Because even with silence, one thing still decides outcomes. The moment between trigger and response. The space where discipline is either applied or lost.
Most people live in reaction. A comment, a slight, a pressure, a challenge. They respond immediately. Emotion drives action. Impulse drives words. Habit drives decisions. That's weakness. The moment between trigger and response is where strength is forged. This gap is where unshakable power lives. You have a choice. Most people don't see it. They act as if every stimulus requires a reaction. Social norms, ego, fear. They tell them, speak now, act now, react now. That is the trap. It's not about being slow. It's about being deliberate.
You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to breathe. You don't need their permission to act from strength instead of impulse. Yet most people behave as if they do. They respond to every insult. They react to every pressure. They defend at every opportunity. This is where power leaks. The gap is where unshakable strength is built. Say it again. The gap is where strength is built. Here's the truth. Every reaction can be improved. Every response can be trained. Every impulse can be delayed. You train the pause until it becomes automatic. Automatic control is freedom. Freedom from emotional hijacking. Freedom from manipulation. Freedom from distraction. You have a choice. That's the key. A real-world example. Two colleagues clash in a meeting. One snaps immediately, saying what they feel. Words escalate, tension rises, the interaction spirals out of control. The other pauses. 1 breath, 2, 3. Then they respond, calm, controlled, measured. The room shifts. Authority is established. The escalation is neutralized. Outcomes are controlled. 1 breath changed everything. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's why the gap works. Every trigger carries energy, emotional energy, impulse energy, pressure energy. If you respond instantly, that energy controls you. You obey the moment. You react to the outside instead of leading from the inside. If you pause, even briefly, you take control of that energy. You decide how to use it. You channel it into clarity, precision, and impact. It's not about repression. It's about direction. You don't need their permission to take a breath. You don't need their permission to slow the tempo. You don't need their permission to create distance between stimulus and action. This is mastery. Here's a practical method. When triggered, stop. Breathe. Count silently. 1, 2, 3. Feel the impulse. Observe the emotion. Then respond intentionally. It feels uncomfortable at first. That's the point. Strength grows in discomfort. You have a choice. That's the key. Mastering this gap also trains patience. Most people fear waiting. They fear judgment. They fear missed opportunity. Pause is not hesitation. Pause is strategy. People who master the gap make fewer mistakes. They speak less nonsense. They act less impulsively. They hold power without display. Stillness is dominance. Silence is leverage. The pause is authority. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's another real-world scenario. A leader receives an email filled with criticism. The instant reaction is to reply defensively. But instead, they wait. 1 hour, 1 day, 1 night. They draft, delete, redraft. The final response is concise, measured, and authoritative. The critic has less ammunition. The message lands with force. All because the gap was respected. You don't need their permission to wait. You don't need their permission to craft your response. You don't need their permission to prioritize composure over emotion. This is discipline. Discipline shapes power. Power shapes reality. The gap also prevents regret. People who act immediately often regret words, actions, decisions. People who pause rarely do. This is the invisible advantage of unshakable individuals. They protect themselves from themselves. You have a choice. That's the key. Another principle, the gap teaches awareness. When you pause, you observe not only yourself, but the other person, motives, emotional state, triggers, opportunities. You respond with insight, not reaction. It's not about manipulation. It's about mastery. You don't need their permission to assess. You don't need their permission to analyze. You don't need their permission to decide on impact before reaction. Here's a daily practice. Identify one trigger per day. Pause deliberately before responding. Measure the discomfort. Observe the result. Repeat until automatic. Strength grows in repetition. Power grows in consistency. Authority grows in patience. You have a choice. That's the key. By now, the pattern is clear. Reaction leaks power. Emotion hijacks authority. Weak boundaries invite manipulation. Over-explaining leaks control. Calm is a weapon. Urgency reveals fear. Approval dissolves authority. Silence stores energy. The gap solidifies it all. When mastered, the gap turns every trigger into an opportunity, every pressure into leverage, every moment of tension into a demonstration of command. You pause, you breathe, you respond, and the world notices. You have a choice. That's the key. Master the gap, master yourself, and then you take the next step. Because mastery of the pause is not the end. It is preparation for deliberate action.
Most people chase power through tactics, strategy, or influence. They read books, memorize techniques, imitate behavior. Yet they fail to see the invisible limiter, their own body. A dysregulated body cannot hold power. That's the key. Your nervous system, your physiology, sets your ceiling. It determines how calm you are under pressure. It determines how well you execute strategy. It determines how authority is perceived. You have a choice. Most people ignore their body. They sit tense, breathe shallow, react from adrenaline. They wonder why influence fails, why authority feels forced, why respect is fleeting. It's not about their strategy, it's about their discipline. Stability before strategy. Say it again. Stability before strategy. Unshakable people manage their nervous system before they manage the world. They breathe first. They stand grounded. They move with intention. It's not optional. It's fundamental. You don't need their permission to control your body. You don't need their permission to regulate your nerves. You don't need their permission to command presence. Yet most people behave as if they do. They allow adrenaline spikes to dictate tone. They let fear tighten shoulders and speed heartbeats. They let discomfort drive decisions. This is why most people crash under pressure, and why a few remain unshakable. Breath is your first tool. A calm inhale, a slow exhale signals safety to your nervous system. It shifts you from reactive mode to intentional mode. It gives you access to clarity and control. Stillness is your second tool. Movement releases energy. Thoughtless movement leaks power. Stopping, grounding, centering, it signals dominance. Posture is your third tool. Straight spine, relaxed shoulders, chin aligned. You look taller, stronger, and unmovable even before saying a word. Stability before strategy. You have a choice. Here's a practical exercise. When stress arises, notice your body first. Check your breathing. Are you shallow, rapid, erratic? Slow it. Check your shoulders. Are they tight? Drop them. Check your stance. Are your feet rooted? Plant them. Each adjustment stores power. Each adjustment signals command. You don't need their permission to anchor yourself. You don't need their permission to regain composure. You don't need their permission to control your internal state. Most people skip this step and wonder why they can't project authority. Your nervous system sets your ceiling. Everything else flows from there. Speech, tone, presence, decisions, influence. It's not about charisma. It's about control. Real-world example. A leader faces an angry board member. Voices rise, tension peaks. Most would flinch, speak faster,
react emotionally. Unshakable leaders slow their breath, ground their feet, lower their voice. One pause, one measured response. Control is immediately evident. Energy shifts, the board member adjusts, the room follows. Stability before strategy. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's another insight. Your nervous system also controls endurance. High-stress situations require composure over time. If your body is dysregulated, you fatigue quickly. If your body is regulated, you sustain power. Breath, posture, stillness, tools of dominance. Repeat it again. Breath, posture, stillness. Discipline here is invisible, yet it is the foundation of every other chapter you've mastered. Reaction, emotion, boundaries, calm, urgency, approval, silence, the gap. All of it relies on your internal regulation. Without it, all other disciplines crumble. You have a choice. Here's how to train daily. Morning breath work, 3 minutes minimum. Deep inhale, slow exhale. Anchor yourself. Posture checks. Set alarms or cues. Stand tall. Relax shoulders. Root feet. Micro pauses throughout the day. Whenever tension arises, pause. Inhale. Exhale. Reset. This is not optional if you want to be unshakable. This is the foundation. Stability before strategy. Here's a final truth. Power without regulation is smoke. It looks impressive at first. It collapses under pressure. It is visible only when circumstances are calm. Power with regulation is gravity. It is invisible until it moves. It is unmovable under chaos. It is permanent. You have a choice. That's the key. By mastering your nervous system, you create a body that follows your mind, not the other way around. You become the anchor in chaos, the calm in storms, the force others unconsciously defer to. Everything else, reaction, emotional control, boundaries, calm, urgency, approval, silence, the gap, all becomes easier, more reliable, more absolute. You cannot fake this. You cannot shortcut this. You must internalize it, train it, own it. Stability before strategy. Remember, your ceiling is your nervous system. Raise it, expand it, own it. Then the world will adjust to you, not the other way around.
Most people misunderstand power. They think winning every argument is proof of authority. They think scoring points proves dominance. They think verbal victories equal respect. They're wrong. Winning small arguments often costs more than it gains. Every ego-driven victory leaks long-term authority. That's the key. You have a choice. You can try to win every interaction, or you can preserve your influence. Unshakable people choose position over ego. They think decades, not minutes. They see the long game. They prioritize leverage over temporary satisfaction. It's not about weakness. It's about discipline. You don't need their permission to step back. You don't need their permission to let someone else win. You don't need their permission to protect the bigger picture. Most people behave as if they do. They argue every point. They correct every misstatement. They defend every micro-slight. And they lose power quietly, consistently. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's a principle. Authority is earned through selective engagement, not constant opposition. Every unnecessary confrontation dissipates energy. Every small victory inflates ego. Every reaction gives others insight into your triggers. Unshakable people control the ledger. They weigh the cost of engagement. They choose battles that matter. They let the rest go. Letting someone else win doesn't diminish you. It signals strategy. It signals foresight. It signals self-control. This is leverage in action. Example, in a negotiation, one party insists on a minor point. Most would push back,
argue or debate the inconsequential. Unshakable people pause, evaluate, and sometimes yield on the small issue. Why? Because the larger objective is untouched, because the energy saved will be deployed on the decisive point, because yielding temporarily demonstrates control, not weakness. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's another truth. Small wins are addictive. Most people chase validation through micro-victories. They want to prove they're right. They want to feel superior momentarily. It's a trap. Temporary satisfaction never builds authority. It builds tension, resentment, and fatigue. Unshakable people refuse the trap. They pick the hill worth dying on. They ignore the pebbles. Every interaction is energy. Energy spent on ego is energy wasted. Energy preserved compounds over time. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's a behavioral method. Listen first, react last. Ask, does this matter in the long run? If not, let it slide. Hold position silently. Preserve your power. You don't need their permission to ignore the small stuff. You don't need their permission to maintain your composure. You don't need their permission to stay unshakable while others squabble. Another insight. Letting others win teaches patience and observation. You observe motives. You observe tactics. You observe character. And when the moment comes for decisive action, you strike with full force. Small losses create big gains. It's not about concession. It's about timing. It's about leverage. It's about control. You have a choice. That's the key. Let's talk about perception. People who fight every point appear reactive. People who choose their battles appear strategic. One is exhausting. The other inspires trust and respect. You don't need their permission to craft perception. You don't need their permission to act deliberately. You don't need their permission to preserve authority over ego. Here's an example in personal life. A friend misrepresents a story. Most would correct them immediately. Unshakable people remain silent. Later, when context matters, the truth emerges. The temporary win of confrontation would have cost credibility. The long-term authority remains intact. Small victories often obscure the bigger picture. Unshakable people focus on outcomes, not validation, not ego, not applause. They understand the energy economy. Preserve energy, spend wisely, win decisively. You have a choice. That's the key. Another discipline. Maintain silence in debates you cannot control. Silence is not surrender. It is compression. It stores power. It weighs outcomes before committing. You learned this in previous chapters. Reaction leaks authority. Emotion hijacks influence. Silence stores it. Combine silence with selective engagement. Unstoppable. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to wait. You don't need their permission to decide which battles to fight. Here's the summary of action. Stop proving yourself constantly. Let minor points go. Preserve energy for the decisive moments. Maintain composure. Apply leverage intentionally. Winning small arguments loses long-term authority. Choosing position over ego preserves it. You have a choice. That's the key. By mastering selective engagement, you finalize one more step towards unshakable strength. You control reaction. You manage emotion. You preserve energy. You conserve authority. And when the decisive moment comes, you strike with clarity, power, and impact.
Most people live in chains. Chains of approval. Chains of expectation. Chains of other people's opinions. They give away their peace. They outsource their confidence. They make strangers the architects of their mood. That's weakness. True unshakable power comes from emotional independence. You have a choice. You can rely on others for your sense of self, or you can own it fully. You can outsource validation, or you can generate it internally. You can live for applause, or you can live for impact. Nothing external can control you once you achieve emotional independence. Nothing to prove, nothing to lose. Repeat it. Nothing to prove, nothing to lose. This is the final freedom. Freedom from judgment, freedom from disappointment, freedom from manipulation. It's not about isolation, it's about internal authority. You don't need their permission to feel confident. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need their permission to be unshakable. Here's the truth. Needing validation is a slow bleed of power. Every compliment sought, every approval craved, every reassurance asked leaks influence. Every time you allow external voices to dictate your self-worth, you weaken. You have a choice. That's the key. Emotional independence doesn't mean detachment from people. It means detachment from outcome dependency. It means engaging fully without expectation. It means acting without needing affirmation. Example: a leader faces criticism. Most people panic. Most people apologize unnecessarily. Most people over-explain or overcompensate. Unshakable leaders pause. They breathe. They observe. They respond with clarity. They are unmoved. They are consistent. They are effective. Nothing external controls them. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's how to build it. Notice triggers. Identify moments when your emotions depend on someone else's opinion. Pause. Before reacting, take a breath. Assess whether this is internal or external. Internalize validation. Ask yourself, do I need this approval to act, to feel strong, to be right? Repeat. Nothing to prove, nothing to lose. Over time, emotional independence becomes automatic. You stop chasing reactions. You stop over-explaining. You stop bending. You don't need their permission to decide your mood. You don't need their permission to maintain composure. You don't need their permission to be free. Here's another layer. Emotional independence is the ultimate shield against manipulation. When people cannot control your feelings, they cannot control you. When people cannot provoke you, they cannot leverage you. When people cannot derail you, they cannot distract you. Power resides in your internal state, not in applause, not in conflict, not in the responses of others. Nothing to prove, nothing to lose. Real-world example. A team member criticizes your plan. Most leaders react defensively. They argue, they justify, they validate their ego. Unshakable leaders smile. They listen. They correct only if necessary. The plan advances. Authority is preserved. Influence is magnified. The difference? Emotional independence. You have a choice. That's the key. Emotional independence also enhances decision-making. When you act without needing approval, your choices are strategic. When you act without fear of judgment, your moves are decisive. When you act without external pressure, your presence is magnetic. It's not about coldness, it's about freedom. It's about discipline. It's about sovereignty over your inner world. You don't need their permission to think clearly. You don't need their permission to feel self-assured. You don't need their permission to lead from calm authority. Another insight. Emotional independence transforms relationships. You stop tolerating toxicity. You stop overcommitting. You stop seeking unnecessary approval. You engage from strength, not need. You influence through consistency, not fear. You inspire through presence, not desperation. Nothing to prove, nothing to lose. Here's the behavioral blueprint. Daily check-in. Assess whose opinion you're prioritizing. Choose consciously. Decide which external inputs matter, which don't. Internalize validation. Ask yourself, do I need this approval to act, to feel strong, to be right?
Practice detachment. Respond without attachment to outcome. You have a choice. That's the key. This chapter concludes the journey of becoming unshakable. You've learned to stop reacting. You've learned to control emotions. You've learned to set boundaries. You've learned calm, urgency, approval detachment, silence, and strategic pause. You've learned that your body sets your ceiling. You've learned to conserve energy, pick battles, and act with intention. Now you learn the ultimate truth. Freedom resides within. Emotional independence is the final frontier. It is the invisible force behind all influence. It is the unseen power behind presence. It is the foundation that makes everything else work. Nothing to prove, nothing to lose. Internal authority is the only authority that cannot be challenged. You have a choice. That's the key. From this moment forward, stop outsourcing your validation. Stop reacting to every external pressure. Stop letting others dictate your state. Stand firm, breathe, center, act. Be unshakable, be sovereign, be free. Closing challenge. You are now armed with every tool to remain unshakable. Apply them relentlessly. Protect your state. Conserve your energy. Let others chase validation, emotion, and reaction. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. Nothing to prove, nothing to lose. Now, go. Live the life that only an unshakable person can lead.
Most people believe pressure builds character. It doesn't. Pressure doesn't create strength. Pressure doesn't forge resilience. Pressure doesn't make you unshakable. It reveals who you already are. That's the key. You have a choice. You can let pressure expose weakness, or you can prepare yourself to reveal strength. Every stressful situation acts like a mirror. It reflects habits, mindset, discipline, and control. It shows cracks, it shows patterns, it shows who bends and who stands. It's not about pressure making you stronger. It's about pressure revealing the strength you've cultivated in private. You don't need their permission to train for pressure. You don't need their permission to rehearse calm. You don't need their permission to practice composure. Most people wait until the storm hits. Then they panic. Then they react. Then they lose. Unshakable people prepare. They practice calm under small stakes so that when the stakes grow, composure is automatic. They rehearse emotional independence in safe situations. They cultivate pause before responses. They regulate their nervous system daily. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's the principle. Your reaction under pressure is a function of your training, not the intensity of stress. A calm response in a minor conflict translates to calm under major conflict. A steady breath when challenged prepares you for the ultimate confrontation. A controlled body leads to a controlled mind. It's not about luck, it's about discipline. Example. Consider elite performers in championship finals, athletes in championship finals, leaders in boardrooms during crises, surgeons in life or death situations. What sets them apart is not pressure tolerance at the moment of crisis. It's rehearsal, preparation, and internal regulation. Pressure exposes what was already inside. You have a choice. That's the key. Another principle. Pressure amplifies existing habits. Good habits shine. Poor habits crumble. Reactive people under low pressure panic under high pressure. Disciplined people under low pressure remain deliberate under high pressure. Every practice moment counts. Every micro-action compounds. Every pause in the small moments trains you for the big ones. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's how to build pressure tolerance. Incremental exposure. Seek challenges that make you slightly uncomfortable. Small stress, managed deliberately. Controlled reactions. Observe your impulses. Pause. Respond deliberately. Reflective evaluation.
After each challenge, review your responses, identify cracks, reinforce discipline. Over time, your nervous system adapts, your mind adjusts, your reactions become predictable to you but surprising to others. Nothing external creates strength. It only exposes what exists. You develop before the test. You rehearse before the trial. You don't need their permission to prepare. You don't need their permission to simulate stress. You don't need their permission to train internal calm. Here's a real-world scenario. A trader faces sudden market turbulence. Most panic. They sell impulsively. They lose. The disciplined trader breathes, analyzes, pauses. They execute with precision. They remain calm while others collapse. Pressure reveals their preparation. It doesn't create it. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's a mindset shift. When stress hits, think, I am being revealed, not made. Your reaction is proof of your training or lack of it. Every pressure moment is feedback, not punishment. Calm performers rise when stakes increase. Reactive performers fall. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's preparation. You have a choice. That's the key. Another tactic, rehearsal under artificial pressure. Simulate deadlines, simulate confrontation, simulate uncertainty. Notice your emotional, physiological, and mental responses. Adjust, refine, repeat. The next real pressure will feel manageable. Your internal authority will dominate the external chaos. Remember, the world tests you constantly. Pressure is inevitable. Your reaction is predictable if you've trained. It's not about avoiding pressure. It's about revealing the strength you already hold. You don't need their permission to prepare. You don't need their permission to build tolerance. You don't need their permission to own your reactions. Every time you control yourself under stress, you increase your power. Every time you master internal calm, you expand authority. Every time you pause, breathe, and respond intentionally, you train the unshakable mindset. You have a choice. That's the key. Let's close with this. Pressure doesn't create the unshakable. It exposes the unshakable. The world will challenge you. The stakes will rise. The test will come. If you've trained, you will rise. If you haven't, you will falter. Preparation is the secret. Discipline is the lever. Internal mastery is the shield. You have a choice. That's the key. Now you step forward knowing this. You don't wait for crisis to reveal strength. You cultivate it daily. You train. You pause. You breathe. You act deliberately. Pressure reveals. It never creates.
Most people overestimate the power of intensity. They think showing up in bursts of energy equals progress. They think sporadic brilliance equals dominance. They think emotional spikes impress. It doesn't. Intensity is loud. It is temporary. It is impressive in the moment, but it fades. Consistency lasts. That's the key. You have a choice. You can chase intensity, flashing like fireworks, burning bright for a day, or you can develop steady, relentless discipline that builds real power over time. Unshakable people are boringly reliable. They don't wait for motivation. They show up. They act. They repeat. Day after day, moment after moment. This is not glamorous. It is not flashy. It is not viral, but it is unstoppable. Predictable habits build unpredictable power. Say it again. Predictable habits build unpredictable power. You don't need their permission to act consistently. You don't need their permission to honor the process. You don't need their permission to prioritize discipline over drama. Most people crash when motivation spikes fade. Most people fade when attention shifts. Most people burn out when pressure rises. Unshakable people don't rely on motivation. They rely on systems. They rely on habit. They rely on discipline. It's not about passion. It's about practice. It's not about bursts. It's about repetition. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's a principle. The loudest signals are rarely the strongest.
A person shouting a point, showing emotion, or, quote, grinding hard occasionally may appear powerful, but reliability is what others depend on. And dependence creates authority. Consistency creates trust. Consistency creates influence. Example: consider a mentor, manager, or leader you respect. They are rarely the loudest or flashiest. They are steady. They do the work daily. They show up even when no one notices. Their influence compounds silently. Others feel it. They respect it. They rely on it. Emotional spikes impress. Steady discipline dominates. You have a choice. That's the key. Another insight: consistency trains the mind and body simultaneously. Small, repeated actions wire the nervous system. They automate calm under stress. They build competence, which becomes confidence. They embed unshakable habits in daily life. Each repeated choice reinforces another. Each small victory compounds over time. Each day of consistent action builds a fortress no external pressure can breach. You don't need their permission to repeat effort. You don't need their permission to stay patient. You don't need their permission to trust the process. Let's break it down. Daily micro-habits. Choose 2 to 3 core actions that reflect your discipline. Perform them without fail. Non-negotiable routines. Decide on behaviors that are obligatory. No exceptions, no excuses. Track progress. Record, review, adjust, but never abandon consistency for fleeting intensity. Predictable habits build unpredictable power. You have a choice. That's the key. Real-world example. A sales professional calls prospects every day without fail. One day, a deal closes that seems sudden. Most people think luck created it. The Unshakeable know it was consistency, the daily calls, the routine follow-ups, the invisible effort that produced the result. Consistency compounds silently. Intensity blazes temporarily. Discipline prevails. Here's a mindset shift. Focus on what you can control. Focus on the habits, not the hype. Focus on showing up when it's convenient and when it's inconvenient. Your actions will echo longer than your words. Your results will outlast your mood swings. Your authority will endure far beyond flash-in-the-pan effort. You have a choice. That's the key. Consistency also builds resilience. When challenges hit, habitual discipline keeps you grounded. When energy dips, routine carries you forward. When the world is chaotic, your structure stabilizes everything else. Intense bursts are easily disrupted. Steady habits are unshakable. It's not about excitement, it's about reliability. It's not about performance peaks, it's about presence across time. You don't need their permission to be consistent. You don't need their permission to practice discipline daily. You don't need their permission to ignore the applause and focus on action. Here's the final insight. The world rewards those who are steady. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, not the most emotional. It rewards those who are dependable. Those who repeat effort when no one watches. Those who act even when motivation is absent. Predictable habits build unpredictable power. You have a choice. That's the key. So each day decide intensity or consistency, ego bursts or steady authority, emotional highs or deliberate, repeated action. Choose consistency. Show up, act, repeat, dominate quietly, relentlessly.
Most people fight everything. They react to every insult, every slight, every inconvenience. They try to prove themselves in every moment. They exhaust energy defending every opinion, every idea, every position. That's weakness. Unshakable people understand not every battle deserves engagement. Power is selective. You have a choice. You can fight every small conflict and drain your resources, or you can pick your battles and preserve your strength for the moments that truly matter. You can act impulsively, or you can act deliberately. You can react emotionally, or you can respond strategically.
The general doesn't charge at every skirmish. The general surveys the battlefield, identifies priorities, and allocates resources with precision. That's the key. Here's the principle. Your energy is finite. Every fight you engage in diminishes your capacity for meaningful victories. Every reaction spent on trivial matters weakens focus. Every emotional investment in minor conflicts compromises discipline. Power is selective. Focus is strength. You don't need their permission to disengage. You don't need their permission to conserve energy. You don't need their permission to act strategically. Example. Consider leadership in high-stakes environments. A CEO faces constant criticism, rumors, and petty politics. Most react immediately, trying to prove themselves. They waste time, energy, and influence. The unshakable CEO chooses battles. They respond only when impact matters. They preserve calm and authority by remaining silent on trivial attacks. They strike decisively when stakes are high. You have a choice. That's the key. Another principle. Disengagement is not weakness. Avoiding unnecessary battles is not surrender. It is discipline. It is foresight. It is a form of power invisible to the impulsive. The world confuses reaction with strength. It celebrates noise. It applauds drama. You have a choice. That's the key. Power is measured by what you resist engaging with, not by what you react to. Strategic disengagement preserves resources. Strategic disengagement maintains clarity. Strategic disengagement ensures that when the truly important moment arises, you are ready, composed, and lethal in execution. Example, a military analogy. Generals do not commit troops to every skirmish. They wait. They observe. They strike with precision and overwhelming force when timing and positioning guarantee maximum impact. Your life is the battlefield. Your time, energy, and attention are troops. Deploy them wisely. You don't need their permission to conserve strength. You don't need their permission to prioritize impact over ego. You don't need their permission to focus on battles that matter. Another truth. Emotional responses are cheap currency. Reacting to every slight feels urgent. It feels satisfying. It feels necessary. It is none of these. Reacting to every minor conflict costs discipline. It costs focus. It costs momentum. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's how to implement battle selection in daily life. Assess impact. Before responding, ask, will this matter in 1 day, 1 month, 1 year? Evaluate energy cost. Will engaging drain resources without significant gain? Strategize response. If the battle is essential, respond with focus and authority. If not, disengage. This is discipline, not avoidance. It's foresight, not fear. It's strength, not weakness. Power is selective. Focus is the multiplier. Calm is the shield. Example. In personal relationships, not every comment requires correction. Not every criticism needs confrontation. Not every disagreement needs validation. The unshakable person responds only when values, integrity, or long-term goals are at stake. The rest is noise. Ignored noise preserves clarity. Ignored noise amplifies influence. You have a choice. That's the key. Another insight. Choosing your battles builds reputation. People notice restraint. They respect precision. They follow those who strike only when necessary, not those who react constantly. Your authority compounds quietly, unseen by the impulsive. Your impact grows exponentially, unseen by the distracted. Your power consolidates while others expend it on the trivial. You don't need their permission to conserve energy. You don't need their permission to disengage strategically. You don't need their permission to act like a general. Final behavioral instructions. Pause before reacting. Evaluate the stakes. Ask, does this matter? Act decisively only when impact is significant. Let the rest go. Power is not in fighting everything. Power is in fighting what counts. Power is selective. Focus multiplies authority. You have a choice. That's the key. So start today. Stop wasting energy on trivial conflicts. Conserve your resources. Focus your force. Strike decisively. Build unshakable momentum. Power is selective. You have a choice. Use it wisely.
Most people fight everything. They react to every insult, every slight, every inconvenience. They try to prove themselves in every moment. They exhaust energy defending every opinion, every idea, every position. That's weakness. Unshakable people understand, not every battle deserves engagement. Power is selective. You have a choice. You can fight every small conflict and drain your resources, or you can pick your battles and preserve your strength for the moments that truly matter. You can act impulsively, or you can act deliberately. You can react emotionally, or you can respond strategically. The general doesn't charge at every skirmish. The general surveys the battlefield, identifies priorities, and allocates resources with precision. That's the key. Here's the principle. Your energy is finite. Every fight you engage in diminishes your capacity for meaningful victories. Every reaction spent on trivial matters weakens focus. Every emotional investment in minor conflicts compromises discipline. Power is selective. Focus is strength. You don't need their permission to disengage. You don't need their permission to conserve energy. You don't need their permission to act strategically. Example: consider leadership in high-stakes environments. A CEO faces constant criticism, rumors, and petty politics. Most react immediately, trying to prove themselves. They waste time, energy, and influence. The unshakable CEO chooses battles. They respond only when impact matters. They preserve calm and authority by remaining silent on trivial attacks. They strike decisively when stakes are high. You have a choice. That's the key. Another principle: disengagement is not weakness. Avoiding unnecessary battles is not surrender. It is discipline. It is foresight. It is a form of power invisible to the impulsive. The world confuses reaction with strength. It celebrates noise. It applauds drama. You have a choice. That's the key. Power is measured by what you resist engaging with, not by what you react to. Strategic disengagement preserves resources. Strategic disengagement maintains clarity. Strategic disengagement ensures that when the truly important moment arises, you are ready, composed, and lethal in execution. Example: a military analogy. Generals do not commit troops to every skirmish. They wait. They observe. They strike with precision and overwhelming force when timing and positioning guarantee maximum impact. Your life is the battlefield. Your time, energy, and attention are troops. Deploy them wisely. You don't need their permission to conserve strength. You don't need their permission to prioritize impact over ego. You don't need their permission to focus on battles that matter. Another truth: emotional responses are cheap currency. Reacting to every slight feels urgent. It feels satisfying. It feels necessary. It is none of these. Reacting to every minor conflict costs discipline. It costs focus. It costs momentum. You have a choice. That's the key. Here's how to implement battle selection in daily life. Assess impact. Before responding, ask, will this matter in 1 day, 1 month, 1 year? Evaluate energy cost. Will engaging drain resources without significant gain? Strategize response. If the battle is essential, respond with focus and authority. If not, disengage. This is discipline, not avoidance. It's foresight, not fear. It's strength, not weakness. Power is selective. Focus is the multiplier. Calm is the shield. Example: in personal relationships, not every comment requires correction. Not every criticism needs confrontation. Not every disagreement needs validation. The unshakable person responds only when values, integrity, or long-term goals are at stake.
The rest is noise. Ignored noise preserves clarity. Ignored noise amplifies influence. You have a choice. That's the key. Another insight, choosing your battles builds reputation. People notice restraint. They respect precision. They follow those who strike only when necessary, not those who react constantly. Your authority compounds quietly, unseen by the impulsive. Your impact grows exponentially, unseen by the distracted. Your power consolidates while others expend it on the trivial. You don't need their permission to conserve energy. You don't need their permission to disengage strategically. You don't need their permission to act like a general. Final behavioral instructions. Pause before reacting. Evaluate the stakes. Ask, does this matter? Act decisively only when impact is significant. Let the rest go. Power is not in fighting everything. Power is in fighting what counts. Power is selective. Focus multiplies authority. You have a choice. That's the key. So start today. Stop wasting energy on trivial conflicts. Conserve your resources. Focus your force. Strike decisively. Build unshakable momentum. Power is selective. You have a choice. Use it wisely.
Most people chase results. They chase goals. They chase status. They chase approval. And most fail. Why? Because you don't rise to goals, you fall to identity. That's the truth. Your actions are only as strong as the identity that drives them. Your habits are only as durable as the self-image you embody. You have a choice. You can build your life around external validation, or you can anchor it in unshakable identity. You can react to circumstances, or you can respond from a stable center. You can chase approval, or you can define your own worth. That's the key. Here's the principle. Stability is internal, not external. External rewards are fleeting. Praise is temporary. Achievement is impermanent. Identity is constant. It is what holds you steady when chaos erupts. It is what preserves clarity when pressure rises. It is what keeps you calm when others panic. You don't need their permission to define who you are. You don't need their permission to claim certainty. You don't need their permission to embody restraint. Example. Consider elite performers under extreme pressure. Athletes, leaders, negotiators. They don't perform well because the environment is easy. They perform well because their identity is unshakable. I am the constant, they repeat silently. It informs every decision, every movement, every response. Say it again. I am the constant. Repetition reinforces identity. Identity drives behavior. Behavior compounds results. It's not about temporary motivation. It's about permanent self-image. It's not about how you feel today. Stillness is not passive. Stillness is strength. Stillness is control. Stillness is preparation. Most people mistake busyness for productivity. They fill every moment with action. They talk without thinking. They move without direction. That is weakness. Stillness is a muscle. It must be trained daily. It must be exercised deliberately. You have a choice. You can allow your mind to be reactive. You can allow your body to be tense. You can let chaos dictate your behavior. Or you can train stillness. You can train calm. You can train control. That's the key. Here's the principle. When you are still, you are prepared. Stillness allows observation. Stillness allows analysis. Stillness allows decisive action without distraction. Example. Elite performers understand this intuitively. Before a critical presentation, they pause. Before a decisive negotiation, they breathe deeply. Before a high-pressure performance, they sit quietly, grounding themselves.
They repeat silently. I am calm. I am steady. I am ready. Repetition builds automaticity. Stillness becomes habit. Control becomes instinct. It's not about avoiding action. It's about choosing action deliberately. It's not about suppression. It's about mastery. You have a choice. That's the key. Another principle: stillness is a weapon. The world is noisy. Most people react to every stimulus. They're pulled in 1,000 directions. They leak energy constantly. You, trained in stillness, retain power. You observe while others react. You act decisively while others stumble. Your calm becomes gravitational. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need their permission to reflect. You don't need their permission to build inner control. Daily rituals reinforce stillness. Morning pause. Begin your day with 5 minutes of breath awareness. Midday reset. Step back, close your eyes, and observe without judgment. Evening reflection. Review your actions silently, assessing control over reactions. Each repetition strengthens the muscle of stillness. Each conscious pause compounds resilience. Each deliberate breath reinforces authority over self. Example: a surgeon facing a life or death operation does not rush. Their training allows calm precision. Every movement is deliberate. Every decision is clear. Every action is powerful. You have a choice. That's the key. Stillness also protects your nervous system. High stress destroys clarity. High emotion clouds judgment. High noise steals energy. Daily stillness recalibrates. Daily stillness resets focus. Daily stillness stabilizes the body and mind. Repetition phrase: stillness creates clarity. Stillness creates power. Another insight: stillness enhances presence. People notice those who are unshakable. People defer to those who maintain calm. People follow those who act with quiet authority. Your influence grows silently. Your power compounds quietly. Your authority becomes undeniable without effort. You have a choice. That's the key. Behavioral instructions for mastery. Practice silence daily. Even 2 minutes is a start. Observe without reacting. Watch your thoughts, feelings, and environment. Anchor through breath. Slow, controlled breathing anchors calm. Respond, don't react. Let stillness guide your actions. Stillness is discipline. Stillness is strength. Stillness is a weapon. You don't need their permission to train it. You don't need their permission to prioritize calm over chaos. You don't need their permission to grow unshakable. Remember, small, daily repetitions create massive, lasting change. Stillness is not an event, it is a lifestyle. Stillness is not an excuse, it is mastery. Predictable habits of stillness build unstoppable power. Daily control compounds into unshakable authority. Silence before action multiplies impact. You have a choice. That's the key. So, train stillness daily. Pause before reacting. Breathe before deciding. Observe before acting. Respond with calm authority. Build the muscle that makes every other skill sharper.
Most people are always available, always texting back, always agreeing, always attending, and most people are undervalued. Availability is not generosity, it is submission. Over-availability erodes your value. It leaks authority silently. It teaches people they can take without giving. You have a choice. You can say yes to every demand. You can show up for every request. You can constantly validate everyone around you. Or you can step back. You can withdraw strategically. You can let your absence create weight, create respect, create demand. That's the key. Here's the principle. Presence is powerful because it is rare. The world underestimates scarcity. Most people scatter themselves thin. They dilute attention, effort, and energy. Unshakable people understand the reverse. They are selective. They are intentional. They are valuable because they are not omnipresent. Example, consider elite leaders in business and politics. They do not attend every meeting. They do not answer every email immediately. They do not appease every request. Instead, they choose when to show up. They reserve time and energy for what matters most. Their presence becomes a signal. When they appear, it counts. You have a choice. That's the key. Another principle, absence forces reflection. When you are constantly present, people take you for granted. They assume availability is entitlement. They undervalue contributions. Step back. Create space. Let people notice what they are missing. Example, in personal relationships, constant attention is a trap. Those who are always reachable are rarely respected. Those who are slightly distant, who hold boundaries, who allow absence, are valued more. Phrase repeated, presence is powerful because it is rare. Another insight, strategic absence strengthens discipline. You learn to resist impulse. You learn to say no without guilt. You learn to act deliberately rather than react automatically. It's not about manipulation, it's about sovereignty. It's not about coldness, it's about power. It's not about avoidance, it's about strategic control. You have a choice. That's the key. Behavioral instructions. Audit your availability. Identify where you give too much. Set boundaries. Decide where your energy is worth investing. Practice selective presence. Show up intentionally, withdraw intentionally. Observe impact. Notice respect, attention, and appreciation increase as absence is felt. Example, in work, over-communicating diminishes authority. Those who respond immediately to every request are taken lightly. Those who respond with intentional timing are noticed, respected, and listened to. Presence becomes currency. Absence becomes leverage. Respect compounds when your energy is scarce. You don't need their permission to step back. You don't need their permission to withdraw strategically. You don't need their permission to reserve influence. Another principle, absence enhances focus. When you stop scattering energy on constant demands, you reclaim your time. When you reclaim your time, you strengthen your craft. When you strengthen your craft, your presence gains genuine impact. Repetition. Presence is powerful because it is rare. Example, elite performers, athletes, artists, leaders, understand the value of unseen preparation. The world only sees the moment of execution. They do not see the hours of solitude, the quiet focus, the deliberate absence. This absence makes their presence explosive. You have a choice. That's the key. Final insight. Absence cultivates respect. Constant availability breeds entitlement. Strategic absence breeds admiration. It forces others to recalibrate perception of value. It positions you as someone with boundaries, discipline, and gravitas. Remember, authority is silent. Power is subtle. Impact is concentrated. You have a choice. Use it wisely. Step back. Withdraw strategically. Preserve energy. Increase value, demand attention. Presence is powerful because it is rare. You have a choice. Master absence, and you master influence. This is the culmination. Every lesson you've absorbed, every discipline you've practiced, every moment of calm, control, and presence, this is where it converges. Unshakable people are not born, they are forged. And the final form is simple.
Become the person who cannot be moved. You have a choice. You can remain reactive. You can bend to every demand. You can allow emotion, opinion, and circumstance to dictate your life. Or you can stand firm. You can anchor in identity. You can become solid, steady, unmoved. That's the key. Here's the principle. Power lives in immovability. People notice those who cannot be shaken. People defer to those who are consistent. People follow those whose presence commands quiet authority. You don't need to argue. You don't need to prove. You don't need permission to hold your ground. Example. Leaders in crisis, CEOs, generals, and elite athletes exhibit this habit. Rooms change when they enter, even without a word. Their energy stabilizes chaos. Their calm imposes order. Their stillness radiates authority. Repetition phrase. Solid, steady, unmoved. Let's break it down. Silence is power. Talk leaks energy. Noise dilutes impact. The unshakable speak less, act more, and let results communicate their authority. Boundaries are authority. Soft limits invite disrespect. Clear limits command recognition. The unshakable know what is theirs and defend it silently. Calm is dominance. Panic is contagious. Composure inspires. The unshakable breathe through pressure and radiate control. Identity is the foundation. You cannot stand firm without a stable self-image. Goals shift, circumstances fluctuate, but identity anchors behavior, choice, and action. The unshakable repeats silently, I am constant, I am steady, I am the center. You have a choice. That's the key. Behavioral transformation instructions. Pause before reacting. Train the gap between trigger and response. Anchor yourself daily. Breath, posture, stillness. Hold boundaries consistently. Let others feel your limits. Practice selective presence. Withdraw to increase value. Integrate identity into every decision. Act from who you are, not from who you feel you must be. Real-world example. Consider the negotiator who faces hostile opposition. They remain calm while others yell. They withhold impulsive responses. They let patience and clarity dictate timing. In the end, they win, not through force, but through immovable presence. Another example. The elite athlete before a championship performance. The arena is chaotic. Crowds roar. Pressure rises. Yet the unshakable are detached, breathing, poised, present. They move with precision, not panic. The moment bends to their stability. Repetition reinforces transformation. Solid, steady, unmoved. Final integration. Silence, boundaries, calm, and identity are not separate. They are one. They fuse into a force that is felt, not heard, a presence that cannot be shaken by circumstance, insult, or fear. You don't need validation. You don't need agreement. You don't need permission. You only need discipline. Solid, steady, unmoved. Now, the ultimate challenge. Go into your life and embody this. Do not bend for opinion. Do not react for impulse. Do not chase approval. Anchor yourself. Hold boundaries. Train calm. Integrate identity. Become the person who changes the room without speaking. Become the person whose stability inspires. Become the person who cannot be moved. You have a choice. That's the key. Solid, steady, unmoved. You are unshakable. Live it, breathe it, command it. This is the final lesson. The journey ends here, but your transformation continues.
Becoming unshakable is not about confidence. It is about control. Control of your reactions, control of your words, control of your nervous system when pressure arrives. From this moment forward, you do not rush to respond. You do not explain unnecessarily. You do not hand your emotions to people who have not earned access. You pause. You choose. You move with certainty. The challenge is simple and relentless. For the next 30 days, respond slower, speak less, and stand firmer than ever before. Let the world feel your stability. Let silence do the work. This is not motivation. This is your new standard. Become unshakable.